This is the GPL Podcast, part of the Pull Tab Sports family. Boy, if North Dakota hasn't won every game, fire the coach.
Dave Haxtell was fired 32 times.
Is that when I get to pour another old fashioned? I was told it's okay.
Oh, yes.
I tip this on the show. Okay.
But I think the Gophers have, skater-wise, 1-19, the best roster in the country.
Gotcha. I didn't even know that. Yeah, blame it on Don.
Now, here's Jupiter and Vegoe. Good evening and welcome to the GPL Podcast, episode number 273. Well, Vigs, not quite the successful weekend we thought it would be. A split with Bemidji. Initial quick thoughts.
Well, I did think Bemidji was going to give Minnesota problems. I thought overtime was definitely in play this weekend, and at the Sanford Center can be a difficult place to play. And once Bemidji got a lead in that game, you saw them lock it down pretty well. You know, they closed off the middle of the ice, so the Gophers couldn't get any seam passes until they had the extra attacker. They got in front of a lot of shots and ate a lot of pucks, and I bet they had a lot of ice bags on their bodies after that game on Saturday. It's just typical territory structure there to diffuse the Gophers a little bit.
Well, before we get into that, let's bring in our guest. He's a former Gopher. I had him on a quick shift podcast 5 years ago this week, which was kind of fun. It was just an audio only podcast, but I thought it was time to bring him back because he's doing some really cool stuff. Let's bring him in. Mike Carman, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I can't believe it's been 5 years since I felt like it was not that long ago when I hopped on with you guys.
Yeah, you jumped on because I know you were kind of tweeting some things. You weren't happy about the fans leaving early and stuff like that. I'm like,
times have changed now. We're looking good in that area now.
Yeah, we are. So
yeah, that was definitely, you know how it goes. Sometimes you get a little fired up, and we don't need to get into all that again because I hope we're long past those days. But it was a thing I was frustrated with, and I made my voice known the best way I know how at this point in life, which is using Twitter.
It definitely is a good place to do that. Another reason I like to have you on, you know, you got a great podcast coming out, but you know what? You still pay attention very closely to this team, and you're at the home games a lot. You know, you weren't there last week, you had some vacation, but you still follow this team very closely, don't you?
Yeah, it's something my wife and I, it's funny enough, it was her idea to get season tickets. It wasn't even mine. And, when we did that, I remember having the conversation. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to. I've always thought about it since I got done. Just never really pulled the trigger, but I go, just so you know, it's Friday and Saturday when they're at home. Like it's our weekend if we do that. And she didn't blink an eye. She was all about it. And we have a good time with it. And, we have our little rituals, go out before the game, have some beers, and enjoy getting to watch the team. And I love getting to watch them. I mean, I look forward to every weekend when they're at home. And I don't know if I'm as dialed in sometimes as maybe you guys are with certain things that are going on with the team, but I certainly keep in touch with Gordo and Bob and try to be around as much as I can. I really enjoy that. And Derek Peltier is another guy who, obviously fans will know, Gopher fans, and Peltz and I have stayed pretty close since our playing days, and he has the seats next to me upstairs now. So it's kind of something we look forward to together.
I know, Viggs, you ran into Mike a couple weeks ago, didn't you?
Yeah, and you had a guest with you too. You brought Kyle with you to a game at Mariucci, and I think it was his first game there since playing.
It was his first time setting foot in Mariucci since playing, not even just to see the Gophers play.
Well, of course. I mean, he's played on East Coast teams. It's not like he's been here during the season. When would he have even had a chance to come see the Gophers when you're still playing? I mean, it's just not going to happen. He had a very long career.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's seeing him, and then obviously EJ hitting 1,000 games here recently too, and it's been fun to see guys like that, and just it puts in perspective how long that time is. Like 1,000 games in the NHL is a very
Oh,
very long time, and I can't
it is.
imagine still putting the skates on and being able to play.
So Vigs, let's get more into that split this weekend. Home game here Thursday night. They get a decent win, and then Saturday night get down early. Another breakaway goal. How many breakaway goals have they given up this year? I don't remember them making a save on a breakaway goal yet this year.
Yeah, it's not ideal to give those away to Bemidji. They're going to have a hard time creating offense on their own. And so when you allow them opportunities to have those kind of chances that they usually can't generate, it's going to put you in a tough situation. And then, once they did.
Hold on 1 second. Can you move? Is your phone too close to your microphone?
My phone's way over here tonight.
Interesting. We're getting a lot of static from you.
We've got so many issues tonight.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of static from you, unfortunately.
All right,
We'll give him a second here. Oh, hold on. I'm gonna mute you for a second. Okay, then it stopped. There we go. And so Carmen and I were talking before the show. This is what happens when you do it live. Things go wrong.
Yeah, technical difficulties. It's part of the gig. I will say the positive of that is though you don't have to go back and edit. I know Benny does all the editing for us, so I get away with not doing any either.
Well, let's talk about that. You're doing a podcast with Ben Holden called When the Game Ends. What have you done? About 5, 6, 7 episodes so far?
5. Yep. 5 episodes so far. Yeah, it's something that
No, I unmuted him for just a second and it was even worse. And Ben's watching live. He's going to be making fun of our live stuff, but the live is where it's at. So
I have my phone flipped over so I can't see if he's messaging me. But yeah, it's something. Ben and I go way back. He was right when I got out of college and played for Lake Erie. He was our announcer, and so that's how him and I got to know each other. And I was there for a year and a half before I was traded out east, and didn't really stay in touch a whole lot with Ben. But in the last few years, like seeing him do some Big Ten stuff, I'd send him some messages on Twitter, things like that, and kind of reconnected a little bit. And then I was coming to nearby in Detroit, nearby where he lives, to coach this summer. And I had kind of reached out to him and was like, hey, let's get together, whatever. I haven't seen you in years. And it didn't end up working out, but we kept talking that entire weekend. And he kind of brought up to me that he wanted to start a podcast. And I had dabbled in the podcasting before, and I think I shared this with you before I came on today, that there's a lot of hockey podcasts out there. There's a lot of guys talking shop, and to me, and I tried that for a little bit, and it was fun. I love being able to talk hockey and shoot the crap. I don't know if we're allowed to swear on here or not, but
you can swear all you want.
all right, shoot the shit. Sounds a little better. But anyways, getting back to, I did that for probably about 6 months. It kind of lost a little steam with the guy I was doing, and that kind of fell off as those things do. But Ben, he kind of brought that up to me, and my thought was, hey, I've actually got a good idea. What do you think about this? And When the Game Ends was born. Now Ben gets all the credit for the title. He 100% came up with that, and I loved it right away. But it was something that it felt important and impactful, right? Because not just with hockey, but any professional sport. And I've had people reach out that, it's not even sports related to them. They related to career transitions in their life. Whatever it is that you may have been doing for a long time, or, put your heart and soul and all of your effort into, it's like, well, what comes next, right? Like and when it does come, are you ready for it? So being able to have those conversations, and again, there'll definitely be a large hockey focus with guys we bring on, but we're not limited to hockey whatsoever. We already had Will Hooley on rugby rugby star, and just hearing how that goes across from sport to sport, and it doesn't matter. Like it's something that everybody goes through at different levels, whether there's a lot of off ice challenges,
Mhm.
drugs, drinking, anything like that. But also just the guys that have really successful transitions too, right? And covering everything else in between. So it's been a lot of fun. I am learning how to interview, which is a whole other process for me. I can answer questions, and as you can see, I don't know how to be quiet. But having to listen, respond, and ask questions is a different beast.
You know, so I was talking to Mike before the podcast, folks, and I reminded him I went back and listened to our first few podcasts, and they're just brutal. And just doing it, you get better and you get better. Our I literally put together an outline of the show with topics, and that's it. It's meant to be a free flowing podcast with free flowing conversation. If we go 20 minutes, we go 20 minutes. We go an hour, we go an hour. Just how it works out. So, I mean,
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing too. I think Ben and I will have a couple things we want to talk about. We'll both do kind of our own independent research, and then we just kind of let it flow from there. Ben does a great job of keeping, being keeping things on the rails, because
mhm.
there's times I will get completely off topic and down a road, especially if I know the guy ahead of time. And so having Ben there to reel it back in and ask questions, I think we're learning every time we record to feed off each other, right? Like it's not easy to record when we're doing this, right? Everybody's in a different room, different place.
Yep.
Like you don't have those cues in person, so there's definitely a challenge there. But I think every time we do it, I feel a little more comfortable with it, and our rapport just keeps building, and it's been fun.
Yeah, we've had Ben on the show twice, and he's been a great guest on our show. Obviously, definitely a professional broadcaster. I mean, he knows it from top to bottom, and um, it's good you have him guiding you through this because podcasting is new for him, probably, except for being on podcasts. But now actually producing, it's a little different. But it's nice that he has the
Yeah.
broadcasting background.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can hear it, right? I hope anybody that listens to us will at least come check out an episode and see what you think. But Ben's voice is a broadcaster to a T. He has
Mhm.
the delivery, the tempo. He never falters on words. Like it's crazy, and it's something that I really appreciate because it gives me something to again look up to, aspire to. Like I want to be able to project the way he does, right?
Mhm.
That's something he does extremely well.
He definitely does. And
We can
so
stop being nice to him too. I know he's watching right now. We don't have to be nice to Ben the whole time.
oh, I've got nothing but nice things to say about Ben. He was very popular on our show when we had him on. It was live just like this. It's just we always have the best time with Ben. So nothing but positives with him. I always loved how one of his heroes in broadcasting was Frank Mazzacco. And Frank Mazzacco just retired last year, and he was one of his heroes. So, it's just nice to have those people around. Okay, now I see Vegoe. Let me see if I can bring him back in. I don't know what microphone it's picking up though, Vigs. Now we can't even hear you. We're hearing like an echo. I wonder if your AirPods are still trying to connect. Hmm. Yeah, we can't even understand you. Can you understand him, Mike? It sounds like gibberish.
No,
to
I
me.
cannot. No, I cannot. He's trying to talk.
Look at that. He's trying.
It's funny.
He's got
While
a
he's
nice
figuring that out.
microphone. For some reason, that microphone is causing interference or something.
Yeah,
But we're
well,
hearing a
he's
lot of
figuring that out.
interference.
You just talked about Frank Mazzacco, and man, dude, talk about a guy I grew up listening to, and at our alumni golf tournament this summer. I made a point to go up and talk to him because they had put together something for him as kind of like a send off and retirement gift and all that, and I made sure to go grab him because I was like, man, like I grew up listening to Frank, and then getting to have Frank announce my games and be interviewed by him, and now come full circle. As an alumni, it's just I don't think there's a guy out there that can say a bad word about him. He was unbelievable.
I miss our post game meals at either campus pizza or or a couple other places we used to always go after games, and then we just hear the stories from Frank, and they were just wonderful. All right, let me bring in Viggs one more time. Are you there, Viggs?
I'm trying to be here.
Boy,
Hey, there we go.
there you sound better, man.
We will see what
Wow.
happens. I've not changed anything with my setup. Some days it just doesn't work for you, I guess. So,
Well, I'm sorry you had trouble. You're here now. We've been talking about all the stuff Mike's talking about. Did you hear any of it?
some of it, I've listened to the pod a couple of times. I think it's always interesting to hear the perspective of athletes as they're trying to find like that next thing. I think it's challenging. You get so much into your routine and you value yourself and tie yourself to what you've accomplished to date. And when that ends, you got to find like a new identity somehow and something that gets you motivated to get out of bed and be productive. I know a lot of guys who get into scouting, they intentionally have morning coffee with each other to try to make sure that they kind of stay in that routine of a full day of work and interaction with people, because it's quite the change up to go from playing to something next.
Yeah, the camaraderie is definitely something across the board. Every interview, it gets mentioned at some point, and not having that set, the routine's definitely a thing as well. Getting out of having your day basically planned for you at all times, but just, and knowing what your routine is on game days and just like almost doing it without even thinking, right? It's so ingrained in you, losing stuff like that. But, it's something too where I think it was Will Hooley, the rugby player we had on, who brought up, and again, a couple of guys I apologize if other guys hear it and they're like, "Oh, I said that," but the highs are so high when you are an athlete, playing at a high level, and the lows are so low. And I think when you get done, it's difficult also to find something that makes you feel that same high. And kind of what you realize is you may never get to that feeling again, just because it's a sport versus your life and kind of your 9 to 5 or your job or your hobby or whatever it is. Like you can still enjoy that, your family, friends, all that stuff. But the highs you feel are so incredible when you play that sometimes not being able to reach that, guys struggle with having that feeling, that euphoric feeling, right? And so that was a cool point to bring up too, and something I'd never even thought about, but as soon as he said it, it resonated with me. And that's kind of what our goal is with this is, you may agree, disagree, not understand, or be able to empathize with everyone we have on, but that something's going to resonate with you, each time you listen with whoever we have on.
Viggs, I mean, it could be sometimes that I think, athletes hold on too long playing. And because maybe they don't know what to do with their life. So I really love that Mike and Ben are talking about this, because I think it's just such a valid thing that, there is a time when you have to move on and you have to prepare for the next point of your life.
Well, I've talked to people who are entrepreneurs as well. And one of the things that experienced entrepreneurs know is that when they start a business, they also need to start planning how they're going to get out of that business and move on to something next. So it's very intentional in their brain that, yes, I'm building this company or I'm building this project that I'm so passionate about, but at the same time, it can't be my life. I still have to have a family. I still have to be a father, a husband, a dad, a son, whatever it is. You've got to figure out how to balance that and be able to separate from whatever you think you tie yourself to in such a big way and become who you are, which is something different than what you do.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. Like I didn't have the experience of having a kids when I was playing, right? I imagine that changes the dynamic a little bit, in terms of your ability to separate. So yeah, that's definitely something I've never, again, like we talk about it coming from an entrepreneur, right? We're not even talking about sports anymore. So just like the different things that cross all paths of life. And I tell you what, for me, I wish, another reason I do this or why I wanted to start doing it is because I know that transition a lot of guys struggle with. I struggled with it. I retired. You're talking about guys staying too long. I left in my opinion, way too early. And I did it for reasons we won't get into on this pod, but I made a conscious decision and I wasn't ready for how that was going to feel. I wasn't ready for what came
Mm,
next. And I didn't struggle in the way that, some guys really struggle and they turn to, chemical dependencies and things like that. And I'm not knocking anybody that's gone through that. I know plenty of guys that have. But I still struggled mentally and internally with it and trying to figure out what I was going to do next in life. And if we have the opportunity where there's something for people to listen to, like, hey, I'm not alone in this, right? Mental health is such a big thing
yes.
nowadays. And,
Mm,
but the I'm not alone in this thought process and hearing other people talk about it again can resonate with someone and be like, hey, this is normal that I'm feeling this way. And it's okay. Like, it's okay to be unsure of what comes next. And then, yeah, hopefully on the flip side of that, prepare guys with advice from guys we have on the show about what does come next and how to be thinking about that while you're still playing and prepare your exit strategy.
that's such a good point. Just talking about it. I mean, we've got one thing, being a man, you're not supposed to talk about things. Just keep it in and stuff like that. And I think a lot of times that causes you even more problems because you just got to get it out. You need to talk to somebody. You need to discuss it. You need to resolve things. I think that's one of the downfalls of being a man because, growing up, it's like, you got to be a man. But I love how you've started this podcast and you're starting a discussion that hey, it's okay if you're not okay after a long career.
That's it's something again. I keep saying it, and it's become a theme of it. I want something that from each episode to resonate with someone, and if it can ever be in a position where it can help someone, like you said, like we're talking about, know that this is normal what you're going through,
Mhm.
and you are far from the only one to go through it.
I didn't know we were going to get so literary, but there's a book, Iron John by Robert Bly, who kind of
Okay.
talks about manhood and how kind of society today is modernized to a point where men don't feel comfortable talking about things like this.
Mhm.
And throughout history, men would have these rituals and groups and organizations that help them deal with all these challenges throughout their life. And as we've kind of gone into this modern society, that structure isn't there anymore, and you have more people who are feeling isolated and alone. So good to have people like Mike involved, and Paul Martin, his Shine a Light Foundation. He's
Mhm.
really into the mental health, and he struggled with the transition from being a pro hockey player to now he's ingrained with the Gopher hockey culture right now, and I think really likes being around a team, and it's been good for him
Well,
and good for the Gophers.
That's the other thing too is we're trying to make a point of it doesn't matter. Like, especially, a lot of people will look at somebody like Paul Martin who played in the NHL for as long as he did and made tens of millions of dollars. And they're like, well, what does he have to be concerned about when he gets done playing? Right. Like, he never has to work again if he doesn't want to. Guys like that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you were playing in the lowest level of minor leagues. It doesn't matter if you were cut from your college team, your varsity high school team. The point being is you did something your entire life and worked for something your whole life and put all of your focus and energy into that. And when that's gone, it doesn't matter what some guys, the transition's peaceful. They're ready for it. They're good to go. They've accomplished what they need to accomplish. But there are a lot of us that it was not that way.
What a great topic,
You feel like a
Viggs.
failure. You feel like a failure, honestly.
Yeah.
That's what I said it in our first episode when Ben interviewed me to kick off our podcast. He's like, let's start it with you. I'm like, that's fine. But my biggest thing was failure. You feel like you failed. And that was something. And I told the story on that episode of my dad helping me with that process and making me kind of put everything in perspective about not actually having failed. And that's something too, that it's you feel that way, and yeah, just being able to overcome that.
Just amazing. I'm glad you have this podcast. I'm glad we're going to keep sending people to it so they can listen to it. And like Viggs, you talked about, there's a lot of resources out there that people can read or view or whatever to help them in whatever transition they have in their life.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a sign of strength that you are comfortable enough with yourself and the relationships you have to talk about these things and share those experiences, because that's what being a human being is shared experience, and we crave that so much.
Well, I know, Viggs, you put out on Twitter today if anyone had any questions for Mike, so I'm going to check out one of them here. Darren Bakken wants to know, what's Mike's most memorable goal in the maroon and gold? What's your most memorable goal?
Well, I think the obvious one is the first one you score in the maroon and gold. I think is a fairly typical one. The first one you score at Mariucci. My first goal happened to be on the road, but first one you score at Mariucci is a fun one. There are probably, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but there are two. Not that I scored that many, but I think there's two that truly stand out for me, and one was freshman year. We were playing Michigan, and we lit them up pretty good. It was like 8-2, 9-2, something like that. And I scored a shorthanded breakaway goal. Kind of a fighting through guys, chipping it over the goalie. I remember being so pumped up to score the shorthanded breakaway goal and against Michigan too. And so I was really excited about that one. And then I think there's a goal that most people, again, I didn't score a ton, but there's a goal that a lot of people remember, and it was in our Mankato series, the overtime winner. That was in game 2. So that was a lot of fun too. I will never forget that one.
Wow.
I still give Zacharias crap about that. I see him pretty routinely, and I still bring it up just to poke at him.
Well, I've got that one, so let's take a listen to that one.
Now ahead for Carman. Pulls back and shoots and scores! Mike Carman! We're going to game 3! Woo-hoo!
Frank is so wonderful there.
I think it's just YouTube. I think you're the only one enjoying that, maybe.
You couldn't hear that?
I could hear it.
Oh,
I could hear it.
Once again.
I haven't heard that. I tell you what, I haven't heard that one in years, but
it must have gone off the pipe. There was a clear pipe sound there.
Yeah, it was a very, I shot through a defenseman, and it actually ricocheted off the defenseman's pad and went straight down on the ice and straight up under the bar. I don't know how it did it. I won't pretend I did it on purpose, but like they said, they don't ask how. And I was just happy to be done with that game. that was a long weekend.
We got Wilkie wondering. He loves that. If you remember, a lot of players wore 16, but he also kind of wants to hear any stories from that Cato series, because obviously that was an epic series. Besides, 3 overtime games. Is it Mark Pohl that got injured in that series? Was that series?
Tommy Pohl.
Tommy Pohl. Sorry. Tommy Pohl. No, Johnny.
Pohl.
Tommy. That was just brutal.
You're testing my memory here, because it was that year 1000%, but I'm not sure if it was in the regular season when we played them or if it was in playoffs. But yeah, I was standing right on the bench directly in front of him, like when that happened, and that was a pretty gruesome sight. I mean, for those listening, I mean, that's one of the, I don't know if he's the reason, but he's definitely a factor in the rubber boards being there and not having the dashers for the bench. Those things, you hit those in any part of your body, they'll pass on. It's not going to feel good, let alone smashing your head off them. And that was crazy, absolutely crazy to see.
Yeah,
very scary.
It was scary because they had to airlift him over to Mayo, and it just. Oh, it was crazy. Looking at some questions.
Yeah, I mean, as far as that actual weekend goes, I don't remember a ton of specifics. I tell you what, though, I have never been more tired. I think in a normal 3-game series, 3 games in 3 days would be 9 periods. I'm pretty sure we played 14 periods.
Yeah.
It was 13 or 14. Yeah. So, I mean, it was something that, again, you're in the moment. You don't realize like how unique that weekend was until years later. At the time, you're just, thank God we survived, and it kind of kickstarted us into a little mini like back-ended playoff run to get us into the NCAAs, and yeah, it was a fun time. Because for a team that definitely underperformed that year, and we all know that, it was good to get that weekend done down there, and yeah, go on a little bit of a run, anyways.
It was definitely fun. But before we move on, we need to listen to one of our sponsors here and get Viggs to get ready. And hopefully his audio is good. But Viggs, tell us about Jimmy's.
I mean, we've got some snow falling right now, but I think it's still caramel season. I mean, everyone likes it. And the leaves may be covered with snow, but get your Jimmy's caramel dip. Delicious with apples, pretzels, celery, ice cream, even on your finger. Any way you want. Can't go wrong with Jimmy's caramel dip. Pick up a tub or two because you're not going to want to put it down. Caramel is coming. Jimmy's salad, dressing, and dips. Don't ya be messing with my dressing.
And of course, we have Lunch Bucket Hockey, Viggs.
Yeah, I've been seeing some lunch bucket hockey themed jerseys on the social media. If you're looking for something that just shows your hard work and grit and grind players, the guys that would do anything for their teammates, check them out, lunchbuckethockey.com. There are a couple local guys who had a great idea during Friday night lunchtime hockey, and they started this company, and they'd love your support. So stop by their website, and if you need any gear, they're your guys.
Of course, we thank Lunch Bucket Hockey and Jimmy's for sponsoring the GPL podcast. It's time for Vegoe's Top 20. Quite a bit of change on the poll this week, Viggs.
Yeah, we saw some unexpected losses. Minnesota and BC obviously dropping some games to Bemidji and to UConn. Those are things you don't really expect to see happen. And Denver just keeps rolling. I was looking at their results this season, and they have only had one goal game. They haven't gone to OT. I mean, they're just rolling. I don't think their strength of schedule is quite as good as BC and Maine and BU and Western Michigan and Michigan, but they're taking care of business and they're defending champs, so they're going to stay up top.
And they haven't lost in forever.
Yeah, it dates back to last year. It's like over 20 games already. The other team that's new in my top 8 is Western Michigan. They had a big series here, and they took care of business with Colorado College. I think they're going to be a team to watch in NCHC. I think they've got a big trip with Denver here in a couple weeks.
Yeah,
so
I think you're right.
I'll be watching that one.
Just going down the list here, obviously some teams are up and down. UMass Lowell staying strong. Cornell, they had another iffy weekend. Can't really see much else here. It's who's on the border.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. I feel like the top 11 or 12 is pretty strong, maybe even 13. Like those teams are starting to separate. And then you just see a mismatch of teams after that. You see a lot of teams that are around 500, or they haven't played really many difficult games yet, or they've played some decent teams like Ohio State and got swept. So it's really hard to see here at kind of the bottom of the top 20 who's going to be in there. A lot of teams get in there and then they lose a game. So we'll start to see. I think the pairwise is starting to come into focus a little bit, at least in terms of conference. Yeah. Like you're going to see NCHC with 3 teams in that top 10. You're going to see 3 Hockey East teams in that top 10. Big 10, you're going to see 2 or 3. So it's an important time of year, I think, right now.
And what's with the Big 10 right now? I think Wisconsin's played 8 games. Michigan's played 2. And I know we're always kind of in balance, but that's a lot.
I think one of the things with Michigan is their non-conference was a little bit more involved this season and just trying to get those games in. And so they just kind of backloaded their schedule with Big 10. You got the Gophers here. They'll have their Alaska series coming up before break. So it'll even out in the end.
All right, Mike, you never had to deal with the Big 10. It was always WCHA for you. So I'm guessing you might have a little bias towards WCHA. But what are your thoughts on the Big 10 after 10 years now? It's definitely gotten better with the competition.
I'll tell you one thing. I've come completely full circle on it. I like most people hated it when it started. I could not believe it. I'm like, this is terrible. Not only because of breaking up the old WCHA, but just that at that time, the Big Ten wasn't super strong either. Like Minnesota or Michigan are just walking through it every year. And it's kind of like, well, this conference is weak, weak, weak. It's just, the games aren't exciting. There's not the rivalries. I think those rivalries have started to develop with some of the schools. I think it's helped strengthen, the Michigan State rivalries, because before we just play them, the Thanksgiving weekend every year.
Yep.
And so it's helped strengthen some of those. I love it now. I think it's proven itself in a very short period of time to be very quality, good hockey, and anybody can beat anybody on any night, which is what you want to see. Um, I mean, do I miss seeing North Dakota and UMD and St. Cloud and all those teams 4 times a year? Yeah, absolutely. Could not be more disappointed North Dakota's not on the schedule this year. But I'm here for the Big Ten. I think it's been, and I know there are people that will say Big Ten's ruining college hockey now because of all the money going into it. But I think it's been great, and I'm happy to see the fan base come back. Like we kind of talked about that at the beginning a little. It wasn't just weird. It was a little bit scary to be like, what is this? Is this what the new future of Gopher hockey is? Because that's, of all the history and teams that have come through here and programs and all the highlights, to have it, be 1,000 people at a game in Mariucci is just incredible. And not in a good way. So I'm happy to see everything come back the way it is. And I think most people have adjusted to it now.
And really, Viggs, I think it was, adjust or die. That's kind of what's going to happen in college hockey. We've already seen it. AIC is going away, at least from Division I. We might see this with some other schools. So I think the Big Ten has put themselves in a really great position to succeed, not just 5 years from now, but 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Well, you often see it in the transfer portal too with some of the Big Ten players. Like they want to go to another Big Ten program sometimes because they like the nice hotels, they like the chartered flights, they like all the strength and conditioning development that's possible at these big institutions. You look at the budget for a school like Minnesota, they're spending $4 or $5 million on their hockey program. That's not the same at some of these smaller programs, even in the NCHC. Those budgets can be more around 1.5 to 2.5 million. So it's a different experience at these big institutions and, big campuses as well. Cappy's talked about this at Ohio State. It's certainly something to play at an institution like that where you have the football games at the Horseshoe and you get to be a part of that.
So you brought up something there that I was planning to ask you guys and flip it on you for a second. What are your guys' thoughts on the transfer portal?
For one thing, it's going to be much different next year since this is the last year of COVID and everyone's get their extra year. So we wouldn't see somebody like a Soulier being able to come in. So I think that's going to calm down. But now you've got the CHL changes, Viggs. That's just going to add to the chaos, isn't it?
It will definitely add to the chaos because you're going to have more competition for these 20-year-olds who come into college hockey. Oftentimes you'd see coaches go scout the NAHL or the BCHL or the Alberta Junior Hockey League and bring in some rugged, experienced 20-year-olds. Now that competition just got a lot deeper because you'll have these CHL kids that'll be options. Now, as far as the transfer portal, I've never thought that you should have a player on your roster that doesn't want to be there. And so I think the portal really allows both parties to get out of situations where it's just not going to work out. You have some players who, they get passed by incoming recruits. They have an opportunity to go somewhere else and play right away. Now, do I think it maybe makes it too easy for players to walk away from problems? Yes. But there is a problem there. And going to another institution, they're probably going to run into the same thing because they're running away from themselves. And that's not great for young athletes, but I don't think that problem is going to get fixed at the institution they were at. They might just end up not continuing to play.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that either. I mean, that's kind of why I brought it up is, you see some of these guys have been on 3 teams in 4 years and, it's just kind of jump around. If you jump around. Now, to your point, having someone there that doesn't want to be there, that doesn't benefit anybody. I totally agree with that. I just my biggest thing, and again, this is as someone who watches, really as a fan now more than anything. I'm not getting into the weeds too much on things, but I truly think that there needs to be some sort of ramifications on it, or regulations, barriers in place where maybe you get one free transfer, and then you better have a set of reasons to do it again. And there's a very defined set of reasons, because I don't agree with college hockey turning into free agency. I think that's takes kind of the purity out of the game. I mean, NIL is already involved now, which I think is great. To some degree, I think the NIL stuff is great. It's an opportunity for college kids to have a little more financial freedom. Some of the money they're drawing in, they see some of that back. That's great. But that's already turning, it's going to college, and hockey for sure. But you look at football. I mean, you may as well be using your agent to sign your first NFL contract just to go to college, right?
Yeah.
So stuff like that. It's just I don't like seeing college hockey or college sports in general move away from what makes college sports. So yeah, I just think there needs to be some sort of ramifications after maybe one, and then yeah, it's got to be pretty good reason to leave again.
Yeah, I think it's tough to legislate those kinds of things.
Yeah, they keep
across
losing
college
lawsuits.
hockey.
Like I said,
They keep losing
I'm
lawsuits.
talking as a fan.
Yeah. I mean, I think, just like the gentleman's agreement, college hockey coaches could do something like that and institute it themselves. But at the same point, Steve Miller always told me that, the day Gwozdecky got fired from Denver was the minute coaches said, oh, I better really do well to keep my job. I got to do what I have to do to stay successful and win. And if it's to, skirt the edges of recruiting players who are committed elsewhere, or when people jump in the portal, getting really aggressive, these coaches want to win too. And so I think it's just a different era of athletics. And because there's so much money involved, the leashes can get kind of short, despite all the morals and ethics we want to talk about.
That's fair. That's fair take. I just, like I said, from the outside perspective, again, you're speaking from a very logistical, like logical thought process about why this wouldn't work. I'm speaking purely from this is what what I'd like to see. But no, all that makes a lot of sense. I'm always curious because I'll talk with people about it, and everyone's got a different opinion at this point. And so I just was curious to get your guys' takes on that, because it's something that is constantly getting brought up, right? You look at the Gophers, you've got, like you said, Soulier, Wood coming in. He's an incredible player. We wouldn't have those guys without that. So yeah, you can't totally hate on it, but it's just interesting how it's all plays out, I guess, with some guys.
But I do think if you're a program that's relying too much on the portal, you lose your culture. We saw some of that happen to Ohio State last year. We've seen North Dakota go through some of that at points. When you bring in so many new mercenaries in your program that don't understand your culture, it makes it really hard to sustain success. And you see so many negatives when programs do that and they rely on it so heavily.
Yeah, I agree.
It's definitely interesting. I see Steve Larson asking about Gopher signings today, Viggs. It was a busy day, wasn't it, for University of Minnesota?
Yeah, well, with hockey, it's always weird because those NLIs have to be signed and FedEx, and Minnesota, their compliance is cream of the crop, and they're not going to let anything slip until it's totally official. But we did see a couple players sign. Here's Matthew Grimes, big kid. Kind of an unusual route to the Gophers. Not your typical Minnesota hockey player or development team guy, but he's in Sioux Falls now for the USHL. Big defenseman, and he's been having a good year so far.
I couldn't even ask how to pronounce his last name.
Kvasnicka?
Mike, you got to guess what do you guess that? Kvasnicka?
Yeah, the Kvasnik is pretty close, but I'm guessing it's one of those that doesn't look anything like we think it is. Like the K could be silent, the V could be silent. You never know. So, well, I'll just say Vasnika just to be different.
Oh, I like that.
I felt like I heard a Wyzetta pod. Miles Deeth does this youth hockey podcast, and he was talking about his decision about leaving Wayzata for the development program. And he was basically like, yes, you are ready for this. We would love to keep you. You'd be great here, but you should move on and get that experience. And he's a skilled forward, little on the smaller side. Oh yeah. There we go. We got Tony watching here.
Is that
Kwasnika.
Kwasnika?
He's the expert on these young guys.
All right. Well, thank you.
Of course he is. Tony knows all.
Tony knows all. He's known these kids since they were, squirts and peewees.
Rombach, big dude, 6'6", 201. Yikes.
Big player, Spring Lake Park, physical defenseman. He showed up at the national team eval camp and turned a lot of heads with how much he developed in the last couple of years as he's grown into his body. And, we've had issues, I think, with some big defensemen in Minnesota in the past, not continuing their development path once they've hit that. Rombach's only getting better these days with Lincoln, the USHL.
Big kid. Now we go from big to little.
Yeah, full foot smaller. We probably should thank the Logan Cooley connection for LJ Mooney thinking about the Gophers. He's been injured lately for the development team. He took a big hit. I think it was against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That didn't look great.
Let's get revenge this weekend, guys.
Yeah, so he hasn't played for a little bit, but super skilled player. He's one of those guys who could be a first-round pick. The size concerns are there for him, but he's super talented.
We know this name.
Another big forward, Javon Moore from Minnetonka. He did announce last year that he was signing at the Minnetonka signing ceremony, but that wasn't actual NLI. Now he signed it, and just a lot of skills to like. Jack Ramsey has talked about him just doing things that you do not expect to see out of a high school player that's big. So it'll be interesting to see how he continues to develop. I think some of his hockey IQ is still developing with him, and so it'll be interesting to see how he finishes out the year in Sioux Falls with Grimes.
So is this Maceo?
Well, let's go to Tony. He would know. But Benilde St. Margaret's defenseman, who's with the development team now, another big, rangy blue liner.
6'5", 214. Jeez.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Scouts like these guys who are this big and can move.
Oh, there's Eric Brever jumping in. Maceo. All right. That's good.
Yeah.
Oh, Mace. Oh, there. And then Tony jumps in as well. Here we go. Maceo. Okay, so we're good there. That's good. We're learning today, V's. We're learning. Teddy Townsend. You can't mistake
I
this
love
name.
seeing all the size coming in on defense. So size and skill. That's a fun one to see.
Huge dudes.
Well, and I think you saw that with Minnesota's class of defensemen this year. That has definitely been an emphasis of the coaching staff to find some guys with a little more size. Now we've got guys like Mooney and a guy like Townsend who are a little bit on the smaller side. But you can have that mix of size and speed and talent. Townsend's from Eden Prairie, very skilled forward. I was a little surprised to see him sign his NLI. Maybe this is like the Jackson Nevers signing last year where he signed it to just get everybody else off his radar. But he is having a good season in the USHL, which has been a little bit of a surprise for me.
Is Jackson coming next year? That would make 8 players plus a goalie?
I mean, not all these guys have to come. When they sign their NLI, it's the university saying, hey, if you want to enroll next year, you can. There might be some conversations to say, hey, it might be better for you to spend another year in junior. Like that happened with Beckett Hendrickson. At the end of the year, he was signed. He could have come in, but they had a conversation and be like, I think it's better for you to get that extra year of development and come in when you're ready, especially with bigger players. Sometimes that happens. But other guys, they just want to get that signature locked in and stop the other coaches from recruiting them.
Is this the last year of that traditional NLI, Vigs?
Some schools are doing these contract agreements. I've got a Freedom of Information Act request on Minnesota to see just what they're sending to their players this year for hockey. But other schools have some verbiage in there talking about revenue sharing and kind of the new contractual pieces of college athletics. So we will see what happens.
Yeah, and then
It's all changing.
everything changes. The style of hockey changes. The rules change. It's always change.
It is crazy. It was headline news when I was coming up. If you were verbal somewhere and you changed your mind, because it just didn't happen, right? Like it did, but it was very, very rare. And you were front page sports if you did that. And now it's just everything has changed so much. It's crazy. But I'm sure they were saying that 15 years later when I came into school, guys that were playing before then too.
It's crazy, Viggs.
Yeah, I mean, a really good class. I mean, a lot of people have been hard on the Gophers for not being more aggressive with the players that can verbal right now for the future. But I think this class is just a really solid one. A lot of, pro potential in this group, a lot of size, a lot of skill. And we lost Jupe. So I know someone's asking about Hayden Reed in here. He's a Gopher commit who is in the CHL right now, so he's pursuing that. He still told Jess Myers that he's intending to play at Minnesota. The Gophers are still weighing in, what their roster is going to look like for next year. We obviously anticipate some guys like Jimmy Snuggerud are going to sign early. You've got older players who are aging out, like Hughlin and Kester and Nevers, so there are some gaps there. So it's a little bit unknown just exactly how many players, and that's really a conversation the staff doesn't have until the second half.
Hughlin is a guy I'm going to miss seeing on the ice. I love the way he plays, and I love what he brings out there.
Hayden Reed, Viggs?
Big fan of him.
Yep, we were just talking about him being in the CHL. Jess Myers talked to him, so still
sorry, I missed
intending to come
I
here.
hit some button and I was kicked out.
Well, we will see.
All right then. I do have a concern, and maybe Bob will think maybe I'll use one of my CHL picks to pick up a goalie for next season, because we know Soulier's gone and they usually run with 3 goalies, so we know they need to pick up a goalie. You think that's something he might consider doing?
It might be something they're doing, or they might look in the portal again. It's worked out really well so far this year, and there are going to be goalies that are experienced options to turn to. Obviously,
yeah, but they won't have that extra year like Soulier, so it's not. So it's intentionally leaving a school this time.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that, and we could see some CHL goalies that are looking for a net to play in. And I think the staff wants Scary to be the guy.
That's somewhere where the transfer portal, I think, going back to all the caveats we'd have to have in there, but I think for goalies, that's a very beneficial, right? Because how many times are goalies coming in a situation where, 2 young goalies and one of them is going to get the spot, right? One of them is going to get the starting job, and the other one is a damn good goalie, but it's 1A, 1B situation. They're not getting the playing time, and they have the opportunity to go be a starter elsewhere. That's great to see. And obviously, I don't think Soulier had that problem at Penn State. I don't believe. I don't know a ton about him, just what I looked up. It seemed like he was kind of their guy. But everything I've seen out of him with the Gophers, he looks great, and it's nice to have him here.
Yeah, the one thing with Penn State is they had brought in the goalie that they have, Sergachev, right now, and with the understanding that they wanted that incoming player to play a lot. And, Guy Godowski was very effusive with praise of Soulier about doing it the right way. He was happy for him. He just said, he doesn't like to see him play well against Penn State. He said that 4 times.
All right. Well, we need to get to Notre Dame here real quick, Viggs. But before then, we need to hear about Cub Foods, one of my favorite grocery stores, Viggs, by far.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm talking about Jimmy's caramel dip, Cubs is where I go. If I'm looking for apples to dip in that caramel, Cubs got the wide selection. We still got a couple tailgates here coming up. We got the Gophers, Penn State for their last home game of the year. If you need tailgating supplies, head to Cub, get your burgers. They got the pub burgers that I know Kinger really likes, brats, chips, platters, all in one place. And if you're looking for a couple drinks, a lot of them have wine and spirits there now too. So check out Cub. They're one of us.
And a new book we're pushing on Amazon, State 1981, kind of the first 35 years of the state tournament, Viggs.
I didn't pick up that this is a fictional retelling of the book during our first read. So that just adds a little bit of intrigue to it. We all are big high school hockey fans. Well, this is looking at the state tournament from a South St. Paul fictional perspective. So I'm going to have to pick this up. We always talk about Dream State at the end of the year, and this is back when it was just one tournament.
One winner. Take it all. Oh, those were the good days, Vigs. We're just old now. Some of us remember the single tournament, Mike.
Can't say I do. The only stories I remember hearing about is my dad played small northern town, and they had to come across Grand Rapids on their way to the state tournament every year, and that was a tough one.
Now the Orange Machine are tough from up north there. So,
gosh, great jerseys though. I love that orange and black and white. Oh, it's just sweet jerseys. So big weekend, Vigs. Notre Dame. Yes, they're down this year, but they seem to. Well, we talked to Cappy. They seem to win every Friday night and lose every Saturday night, but it's never an easy place to go play at Compton.
No, they can shut down the game pretty good at Compton when they've got their structure going. And one of the things I talked with a lot of the players and Coach Motzko this week was, how does Minnesota manufacture goals when they're in the games like they have against Bemidji State Saturday, the game with Penn State, the game with Omaha? And he said, it takes some skill in front of the net to create offense, and it takes attention to detail. And they just don't have enough guys who are committing to taking away the goalie's eyes, being an anchor in front of the net, and being that presence to get some goals off of rebounds or get goals off of traffic and tips. A lot of guys right now are kind of flying by. They're hoping to tip it with their blade on their way through the shooting lane rather than being in the shooting lane and creating that chaos. So I think Notre Dame is a perfect matchup for Minnesota to see if they've learned anything. I know Motzko's been showing the guys lots of NHL clips of guys standing in front of the net and creating these greasy goals, because I think it's something where they're having a hard time finding current Gopher clips of play like that.
I bet. Mike, we have been kind of talking about this ever since we started the podcast. A lot of times the Minnesota teams, they want to get that extra pass and they want to get that pretty goal. And it seems like there's times when they don't realize this is the kind of game you get a garbage goal or a couple garbage goals or deflections and just getting down and really earning it.
Yeah, and that's something too, especially this year. I mean, you look at, someone asked me the other day what I thought of the team this year, and I have a hard time finding a true weakness or a weak player on the team, right? It looks like they've got 2 first lines and 2 second lines. Every defenseman looks good. It's looked very good from a skill standpoint, right? We all know they can play the skill game and they can do it probably as good, if not better, than anybody in the country. But the reality of it is that when, again, some of these teams that, you play in a smaller barn, or they're a little bit older, a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher, they lock it down more. They don't want to, you're not playing Michigan and playing a racehorse hockey game. That's where you got to go. And it's winning those little battles. It's cycling. It's low to high, simple hockey. And like you said, just going to the net and stopping and battling and having 2-3 guys at the net front. And I obviously I don't think it's news to any of the guys. I mean, these guys have all played hockey their whole lives. They understand that's part of the game. But, you get into a pattern or a rhythm where, especially earlier in the year for the team, things are coming easy. They're scoring these highlight reel goals every shift. And as the season goes on, those are fewer and farther between. And it's about who's going to go to those areas. And I think it'll be exciting to watch this weekend. I didn't get to watch the Bemidji game last weekend, but that was my assumption, is that Bemidji, older, stronger, Sartori coach team, made it tough on them. And you're not going to get those highlight reel tic-tac-toe plays.
Well, and I thought the Beavers are just committed to staying in shot lanes and staying in the middle of the ice and being content to let Minnesota play outside the dots. And then when the Gophers did have scoring chances, they were trying to pick corners. So it's either there wasn't a shot lane or they're trying to pick a corner against a great goalie who's probably one of the best goalies in college hockey. sometimes it's hard to know when to flip that switch from making that highlight skill shot to just saying, all right, we're gonna get after it. We're gonna put some in his feet and play that way. So it's got to be a hard switch to flip.
A great example of that would be Matthew Wood on Saturday, Vigs. He had 10, 12 attempted shots. Only one of them was on goal. So
can't imagine a lot of teams are playing UConn super tight, so it's probably a new experience for him.
But still,
to see it,
it still comes down to basics. You can pick your corners when you can, but a lot of times if you're going to keep missing, hit the pads, get a rebound, get in there, get some garbage stuff. That's what I like.
Yeah, I was asking Oliver Moore, like, who's he looking at for a guy who could be a good net presence? And it's Beckett Hendrickson. He's a big body who can take up a lot of space. And, if he can find that element of his game in college, it's going to be a big thing for Minnesota. Because I do think this is the one thing that this program sometimes needs to work on is these net front goals.
Well, yeah, it's the flip side of having that much skill, right? I mean, like you're talking about picking corners, and there's a time and a place for it. Again, coming from somebody who didn't always pick corners that well, but it's funny that you see so many guys now, and it's part of what the game's morphed too. Is there's so much skill involved in the game now, where guys are picking that short side, high corner way more than guys ever used to before. It used to be kind of the real high-end guys would get it once in a while. Now I feel like everybody tries it. Everybody has the ability to, and sometimes that's not the right shot, especially against an elite goaltender like you guys were talking about. You got to put it in his feet and then just go there and battle. And hopefully we see some of that this weekend. Obviously they have the ability to do it. It's just getting in the habits of doing it.
So what does Minnesota need to do to be successful this weekend, Viggs?
Well,
Jackson's last year too.
I do think Notre Dame has tried to change their style a little bit the last couple of years, and they've gotten away from playing just so much trap, neutral zone defense. They've been a little more aggressive in the forechecking. And so I think the Gophers need to feel out whether or not rush chances are going to be there. And, Minnesota can play and dictate their game however they want, but they can't just go right to getting those gritty goals if the rush chances are there.
Oh, speaking of, we're using that word, our guy, Craig Floor, boys need to be gritty, not pretty. And boy, is that accurate, Viggs.
I mean, it's such a balance. We've seen this team score on the rush and the D get involved. And when those chances are there, that's the time to pick your corners. Once you get set up in the zone and you got to get that ground game going, then it's time to be gritty.
Let's go. I'm excited for this weekend. Compton's always a great arena. It's crowded. It's a great barn.
I feel like what you guys were talking about, that plays into their favor. Sorry, last thing I had just thought on that is, Viggs, you're talking about if they start to, they're trying to get up on the forecheck more. I feel like that plays right into the Gophers' wheelhouse, teams that want to forecheck hard. And so it'll be interesting to see if they do that, or if they're going to sit back a little bit more, because I guess if I was coaching against the Gophers, and I have a hard time, like not coaching anywhere near college hockey. I got peewees and bantam age kids, but I run a very high pressure forecheck. But the reality of it is, if I was coaching against the Gophers, I'd probably sit back a little bit more, because all it takes is 2 crisp breakout passes chipped by the D, and you got odd man rushes you're dealing with all night. So hopefully they do that. But
honestly, they did that really well at Duluth. I remember that first night, Duluth just kept sending 2 guys in, and it was out of there quickly. So Duluth had to adjust, Viggs, because that was not working for them.
Well, they were just late for the dance on all their forechecks, and that was what Minnesota was running into the other weekend with Wisconsin. They're late, and so you've got to be direct and you've got to be quick. And high pressure is great for development, and it's a great way to coach the game. But eventually, at some point, you got to figure out what's winning hockey for you, and what in college, especially, these points are important. And I think for Minnesota, they want to get at least 4 or 5 points out of this weekend to put them in good shape in the Big Ten.
And if you want to see the games this weekend, as usual, only on Peacock Stream. They do a great job. High quality broadcast, Viggs. I love their stream. If you don't have it or doesn't come with your cable package, it's $7.99 for 1 month. I think $7.99 is worth just one game, much less 2 games. And then you could stream the rest of the month, all their other stuff and all other stuff, sports as well. So it is a bargain and it is a high quality broadcast.
For sure. Peacock does it better than probably anyone else.
So everyone get on board. Don't complain about it. That's one thing that's been different since your days, Mike. Fox Sports North had kind of a monopoly, so they could kind of go wherever they want and do whatever they wanted. But things have changed, not just with the leagues, but it's like control of TV. There's just so many things out of Minnesota's control now that it's just a completely different field than it was when you played.
100%. I do miss being able to flip on FSN. I didn't have to know where the game was. I just flip on FSN, right? Did that at my entire child. Well, I think when I was real little, was it MSC or something like
MSC,
that?
yep.
MSC, and then it became FSN, and I mean, I do miss but the world is streaming. It's not surprising that's where we're at.
And now, with all the home stuff being on, Fox 9 or Fox 9 Plus, over the air even, you don't even need cable to get it. So I think that's a bonus, kind of going back to the old Channel 29 days back in the late 80s, Vigs. But, I've gotten people complain, oh, you can go to this website and see this. I'm like, no, I paid for it, $7.99. It's not a lot, Vigs. And it's a bargain, complete bargain.
As we like to tell everyone, we all make choices with our streaming. So
yeah, and don't complain.
Make the right one this weekend. So should be a fun one. I think 6 points for the Gophers.
Oh, I like that. You're going bold with the sweep.
Yeah, all in regulation.
Nice. I like that. How about you, Mike? What do you think? Think Minnesota comes out strong?
Yeah, I think so. I think after, again, I didn't get to watch any of the games last weekend, but I'm guessing that one ate at them a little bit, and it was a good wake up call for them. So I have a lot of faith in that. Bob and Gordo and Paulie and all those guys. They're getting the guys ready to go, and they're going to come out flying. And I know they're on the road, and I know it's a tougher arena to play in. It's a smaller sheet too, right? Small corners, things like that. I just don't see a way that they don't come out flying.
I think it's a little bit wider, but it's got the NHL corners
in
Notre Dame. Gophers will get August Balloon back in the lineup.
On TV.
August Balloon will be back in the lineup. He's another big body that I think can really apply that net foot presence. Cal Thomas is close. I don't know if they'll put him back in the lineup, but he's close, according to Bob. He's knocking on the door.
Well, that's good. I'm going to say sweep as well. Full 6 points. Kind of like Mike said there. I think they took that punch to the face that we've been that Bob's been talking about, Vigs. He's been saying, we need to get punched and brought down a couple levels. It will be better for us if we do.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
Better to get out of the way with early.
Yeah, because things are just going to keep ramping up. You get the 2 Michigan schools coming in December. It's going to be just crazy. So, Vigs, what you got going on? I know it's been super busy for you this week, hasn't it? It's just been crazy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. So we'll see what comes out on GPL here as we go. It's a road weekend this weekend, so our recaps are a little bit limited, but stay in touch.
And you also did a Fellowship of the Rink podcast, didn't you? Tell us about it.
I was on with our friend Hoppy, who's been doing a pod with Joe Smith a lot this year. So Scott asked me to hop on, and I was sure to get on there and talk about my bourbon and my beer choices along with some Gopher talk. So check out them. They've got a great pod going too.
He's got a couple pods
hang on,
going.
Vigs, hang on. Do you have a bourbon recommendation for me? I'm a bourbon guy.
Well,
so I'd love to hear.
We'll get to that. That's definitely an overtime topic.
It's an overtime topic.
That's for the live listeners.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair
definitely
enough.
for the live listeners. And Scott's he's actually credentialed this year, so we get to see him a lot there at Mariucci. So it's nice to get some fresh faces in the press box.
For sure. I was the only media person at the availability this week, so got to get some more people coming on Tuesdays.
That would be good. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on the show with us this week. That was nice.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you reaching out and offering to I love to come on and obviously talk Gopher hockey with you guys, and I appreciate giving us the opportunity to promote our podcast. It's still in the infancy stages, but I think Ben and I, like we've talked about on this, we've got a good thing, and we want to make it something more than just a hobby. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's called When the Game Ends podcast. Just search for it or check out Mike's Twitter handle, and they've got their own Twitter feed for it as well. To go see them on YouTube. So it's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of good stuff. And I would say just keep doing it. Like you said, you get better
Yeah.
and the content gets better as you get better. So
Well, and the other thing too that I want to point out is, the whole podcast doesn't, I'm not saying every episode will or will not do this, but we don't just center around like a negative kind of like, bring me down topics, right? I mean, we tell stories, we get the guys talking. The last one we did with Billy Butters was, and I knew a lot of Billy's story, but I got even more out of interviewing him and the guys he's played with and telling stories about that. He's got some incredible Herb Brooks anecdotes. So again, there's more than just talking about, again, that's the focus of our podcast, but naturally we do some background and get some good stories out of everybody too, that, hockey fans can listen to.
well, it's definitely some great stuff. So make sure you guys all check it out. But that's going to do it for this episode of the GPL podcast. We'll be back next week where we have our special Thanksgiving episode with Nick Angel and Jordan Leopold. For those of you watching live, stay tuned for overtime. For the rest of you, we'll catch you next week on the GPL podcast.